We're just destroying the planet, what we live on. We need to find solutions to counteract that destruction that we're causing.
We know the damaging effects of industrialised food systems. People are starting to look for a solution.
Hunter-gatherers and Neolithic people would probably have foraged on bits of seaweed from the rocky shore.
Slowly, as we have had more readily available foods, more processed foods, it's just not something that we in the West have continued to eat.
Here in the UK, we've got so much sea around us. There's so much potential to develop seaweed farms.
Seaweeds are extremely diverse. Seaweed is in a lot of different products that people might not realise they've eaten. It's in beer, it's in toothpaste, it's in ice cream. Extracts of seaweed act as a gelling or a thickening agent, so a lot of people might have eaten seaweed without knowing it.
It's one of the fastest growing crops, has huge productivity compared to terrestrial plants, with some species growing up to 10 centimetres a day.
Probably about 9 months old,
Yeah.
but it will be growing quite quickly at this time of year.
The seaweed farming industry in the UK is only recently starting to emerge. The market's been dominated by Asia, but we're seeing it popping up all over the place. By 2050, we're going to have to provide about 70% more food than we are currently. So we're going to have to turn to sea-based sources and make sure they're sustainable.
We harvest and process a variety of organic Cornish seaweeds as a superfood, really, and cooking ingredient in delis and to health food shops and to chefs and restaurants.
I've got two favourite seaweeds to eat. One is dulse. There's a red seaweed, quite thin. People liken it to bacon. Very moorish, salty taste. The other one is sea spaghetti. When it's quite young, it's very tender and it's almost like asparagus.
The ranges of seaweed are just incredible. You can do such different things with them when you're cooking. When we first started, the first 2 years that we were working, we were going around and doing all our own, I was cycling around London and Bristol and going to every restaurant and trying to arrange meetings with every chef. And nobody was really interested. We were so broken by that stage, we both had moved into caravans and we were living off like £50 a week, absolutely nothing, and just doing this all the time and not making any money at all.
People are starting to know more and more that seaweed is this incredible thing that's very healthy and very good for you. It's not a plant, it doesn't have roots. It takes its nutrients straight through its leaves. So it's a very basic plant. The demand is growing every year. We can't get enough seaweed at the moment. Whatever we harvest today will be sold tomorrow.
Seaweed absolutely meets the future food needs of a massive global population. All the research that's been done is that people are driven towards seaweed because of its healthiness and its sustainability. Those are the big drivers. It can have a really positive impact on climate change because it's a huge carbon sink, absorbs a lot of carbon as it grows, doesn't need land, doesn't need fresh water, doesn't need fertilizer, which are some of the big issues with terrestrial farming.
At first glance, seaweed is just this slimy, almost disgusting thing that wraps around your leg when you're trying to surf. I think that's one of the things that I love about it because it's just totally misunderstood. Seaweed is higher in vitamins and minerals than any other food class. When you cook with it in something like a stew, it forms a gelatinous-like gel, and that is really soothing and very anti-inflammatory for the digestive tract.
There was some research done that seaweed was something that we started to eat as we hunter-gatherers, we moved more towards the coast, and all the nutrients in the seaweed and seafood we started to eat probably led to the evolution of the modern human brain.
At the moment in UK, it's an undertapped resource, so why not utilise that?
95% of global seaweed production, which is about 32 million tonnes, all comes from Asia and is based on a model with really cheap labour. So how to upscale in a way that's economically efficient is one of the key challenges.
It's still very small scale. It's a very niche product, which means that the price is relatively high. In order to get it into the supermarkets, the price needs to come down a bit and availability needs to just increase. But also people need to be more aware of what they can do with it and how to use it. I think those are the barriers, really.
So we only take up to half a plant so that they can regrow and regenerate. We cut everything with scissors so everything can just grow back again.
As a growing business, it would be, you imagine that you would want to just expand and sell more seaweed, but we wouldn't want to take any more from the natural environment than we do at the moment. So we've grown every year so much that we can't take any more, and we wouldn't want to take any more before it started negatively impacting our local environment.
Growing sustainably is the most important thing for us. With climate change, no one knows what's going to happen. So we've now started farming seaweed as well, and that's where the future lies.
You're not going to compete with the Asian markets on cost. What we need to look at is these higher value markets, whether that be in food or nutrition or nutraceutical, pharmaceutical, biomedical, biomaterials, biofuels. Seaweed really just ticks every box, which is why it's such an exciting industry.
It's also got lots of applications for animal feed. There's extracts of seaweed used to reduce methane emissions in cows.
It can provide a marine habitat for marine wildlife, and it can help to offset many of the harmful or damaging effects of industrialised food systems.
We would want everybody to think of seaweed as a normal staple food. That would be success, because that means seaweed is really back where it should be as an everyday food.
I love seaweed. It's just such a phenomenal thing. We can save the world with seaweed. Everyone can have enough food to eat by using it. Like every time you hear something in the news about it, it's like, yeah, of course seaweed can do that. Seaweed can do everything.